Okay, and we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Asexuality in the Workplace panel that is just about to get started. Welcome anybody who's tuning in live on YouTube. We are, well, at least I'm a visitor today on the Gadigal lands in Sydney, Australia, and I'm very excited to have our panelists today talk a little bit about asexuality in the workplace. There are automatic closed captions available on YouTube, and I know they're not as accurate sometimes as we'd like, but this is the best we've got for today. And if anyone has questions, please feel free to submit them to Slido with the code ACECON23 and select the asexuality in the workplace section for the questions. So we'll be keeping an eye on those if any of them come in. So welcome everybody, and we will just about get started. So we've got a few panelists here today from different walks of life and different kinds of professions. So our first, we'll kick it off with introducing yourself and describing your asexual experience in the workplace or the context in which asexuality plays a role in your workplace. I will kind of go around, I guess, and pick on people. But if you want to raise a hand and go first, go for it. Gemma, take it away.
So I just want to initially acknowledge the Watamedigal people of the Darug Nation on which I live and I work. I happen to live and work quite close to my workplace, and I pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and to their connections to land, sea and community. And I acknowledge that the land that I work, live and have always lived on has always been and will always be Aboriginal land, and that sovereignty was never ceded. And my pronouns are she and her, and I work in retail. So I work in store at Big W, which is a company under Woolworths in Australia. And I am a member of their Proud at Woolworths committee. And so as far as the context with asexuality and myself is, I am one of the committee members for Proud at Woolworths, and they work to support people from the LGBTQIA plus community in their workplaces, making sure that people's gender identities and their sexual orientation rights and their ability to do their job is not squandered by people who want to treat them like crap. To put it bluntly. And some of the things we've done is made sure that they're starting to put gender neutral bathrooms into some of the newer workplaces that are there, and also supporting regional prides, such as in New South Wales, the Parramatta Pride and the Coastal Twist. And they're looking at at least one pride in every Australian state to support, create an activation there and participate in as an active member. And so, so there are a couple people in my workplace who also fit under the acronym, and we do support each other. And ironically, one of my lovely gay work colleagues, he's also biromantic. So he's biromantic homosexual, and that was really awesome to find that out, because we just went, yay! That we were both using split attraction. This is a split attraction model. And he always backs me up with asexual stuff, and he's like, I'm wearing purple on IAD and I'm going to do this. And he's a really good ace advocate in the workplace.
Any volunteers to go next?
Yeah, I can go next. Oh, I'm sorry. Did someone else speak? Okay. So yeah, I think the two kind of frameworks I want to bring up today are first being a teacher who is asexual and how that kind of comes up in the classroom, some of the challenges. I'm not currently a teacher, but I have been one. Currently, I work in tech. And so the other thing that I really kind of want to spotlight is I actually have done some work for other workplaces where I've put on presentations about asexuality through my group Ace Chat, and wanted to just talk about kind of the reception there, why it was important to be brought up there. so yeah, just the kind of the vantage point of how to be an educator who is asexual and be open about it, and some of the challenges of being open about it, and also just why workplaces maybe should be looking into bringing up asexuality in the workplace, making it a more open and accepting environment by acknowledging and having resources for people to understand this orientation.
Nice. Thank you for showing. And also introduce yourself, name, etc. You know.
That's important. Y'all, it's midnight where I am. I am like a 9 o'clock asleep sort of person, so I apologize. But yeah, my name's Marissa. Any pronouns. I identify as panromantic asexual, and I've been doing things in the community such as this for, I guess, about 3 years now. So yeah, very excited to be on this panel with everyone here.
Thank you. I'm just going to pick on somebody to go next. Artemis?
Hello, everyone. I'm Artemis. I use she, her, and I am also on the Midnight Crew in the U.S. My experience, so I currently not in the workforce right now. Just got laid off. But previously, with my previous company, I joined. We had a pride group, and so I joined because I have friends in the community. The content that I consume um, also includes things on the queer community, and so I came to and I was joined as the A, here for the ally, just wanting to learn more, and along the journey. I realized that I was aroace, and I'm actually ago sexual and ago romantic. And when I came to that conclusion, I was chatting with other folks from my works group and going, "Hey, I am the A. Just I now understand A does not stand for ally. A stands for aromantic, asexual, and agender." And it was really great because using those terms, I learned about other folks in the community that wasn't their primary sexuality. Like somebody would be a lesbian or trans, and then the moment I would say, "Hey, I'm aroace," then other people would be like, "Oh, I'm demi," or "I'm also aspec," and it was able to understand and talk more with the folks in the community, and kind of asking to include more ace rep in presentations or questions and answers, and just get the word out. So um, it's been very interesting, but it was had a very supportive culture in my previous job.
Thank you for sharing. Megan?
Hi, my name is Megan. I use she, her pronouns, and I work as a assistant professor at California State University, San Bernardino, which is near Los Angeles. So asexuality defines every part of my job. Like I teach, I do research, I do service, and I'm on the tenure track. So every year I have to put together a little file of all the stuff I do. And if you look at my tenure file, it's just like ace, 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 ace. Did I mention ace? So when I was invited to do this panel, I told Kate, like, well, I, have all these advantages of being able to be very out because, academia is a little bit different than a lot of other workplace contexts. And Kate was like, yeah, but did you really have a choice to be out? And I was like, oh, that's actually very true. Because even when I was applying for my job, I had to explain what my research interests are. I had to write a diversity statement of how do I contribute and think about diversity in the classroom. And I chose to disclose that, I identify on the asexual spectrum in that statement itself when I was applying for jobs. So, but that being said, I have had interesting conversations with colleagues and students, and it's contributed to the kind of work I do. So I can go into more detail later. But one thing I did notice like after my first year was that I'm more out in my workplace than I'm comfortable with. And like, especially with my students, I'm extremely out with students. And I still feel a little bit iffy about that inside, but I don't want to convey any sort of shame to them. And so I've learned that that's a really common experience with other professors. As I've connected to other queer professors, they've said similar things, that like, well, their own identity is more complicated than what they portray to the students, or, oh, they're actually not as comfortable in their identity, or as comfortable like being so open about it. But it is important for our students to have models of queer professors. And so yeah, so in my job, I do special presentations on asexuality for the whole university. I give guest lectures to other classrooms around the world, around the country. And my research is all asexuality focused. And what was the other part? Service. Yeah, and I serve on committees and stuff too, as like the ACE rep, and help with the Queer and Transgender Resource Center on campus and things like that.
Thank you for sharing. And I will share a little bit about myself. Hi, my name is Pat. I use they, them, Yale, or Koi pronouns. And I guess come from a different background. I studied engineering, worked in manufacturing, public service, and I guess the most out I've been was at a not-for-profit queer organization. So I can talk a little bit more about that later and how that kind of plays a role. But I've been differing levels of out in different workplaces and to different people. And sometimes that's gone well, and sometimes that hasn't gone as well as I would like, whether or not I did or didn't out myself and to what extent. So I've done a decent amount of, I guess, involvement in terms of conference organizing and student groups back in university around diversity of all sorts, mostly including being, I guess, back then, women in engineering initiatives, and also ENGIQueers, which is the national group in Canada for queer engineering students. When I first was in graduating and working in manufacturing as a process engineer, engineering training, I guess, legally I have to say that. I realized that a lot of people in my workplace, especially like older mechanics and electricians and operators on the floor, their favorite form of small talk would be, tell me a little bit about your life. Like, do you have kids? Are you in a relationship? And what have you? I think we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So that was an interesting experience in terms of navigating that. And then going from that kind of a little bit more conservative environment, where I did have a single queer fellow employee who I was like, okay, I have an ally here, that kind of thing, to working in a queer not-for-profit where I was doing project management, policy work, and data kind of systems management. And finding out there that while everyone's queer, not all of them are ACE aware and informed. And working there to do advocacy around adding an A to the official acronym, that version of the acronym we were using. So it's not just LGBTQ and it stops there. Making sure that our, asexuality is a option that you can select when you're filling in surveys or requesting services for this organization. I was like, really? You're a queer org and you're not even considering that yet? So it's something there where even within the community, there's definitely more work to be done, and having the safety to kind of be more out there and do that advocacy work has been really nice. And now I'm in a different role. I work for an airline and I do process improvement, and I'm involved with their kind of diversity group as a participant and doing some consultations and kind of flagging when I see things, but not as much related to my asexuality. So that's where I'm at. And we can move on to the next question. So, tell us a little bit about your experience. How have you approached describing your asexual experience and or coming out to colleagues, if at all? So, any takers to volunteer to go first, or shall I start picking up people? Gemma, go for it.
So I've kind of taken a sort of easiest approach that means that I don't have to ace 101 all the time perspective. So I don't hesitate to say that I'm asexual. I share asexual stuff on my Facebook that I have multiple work colleagues on. So if they haven't, but if they've seen it on there, then they're aware of it. But I'm not actively going to every colleague and saying, look, don't have that conversation with me, I'm asexual, because those kind of conversations in a retail setting don't always occur, particularly where I am, because I'm normally on the registers. So a lot of it, we're very customer focused up the front. And a lot of the conversations around people and relationships and things tend to happen in the lunchroom, or they happen on the floor between two people working together. So I am in a much more customer specific front role. But there is opportunity to have conversations with peers, and, no one in my workplace, like no one in my immediate work friends hesitates to go, oh, well, my partner, and says a same gendered name, and nobody bats an eyelid on the surface. And so like on a surface level, being in a retail environment, my work is very predominant in making sure that it is an inclusive workplace, like it's part of all of their policies. They're very keen to make sure that, that any disrespect and all these kind of things is unacceptable. And they, there's things in place to help you if you are experiencing issues either with people with your own gender diversity or with your sexual orientation. Like it's, it's totally unacceptable to be critiquing and insulting and all of that, belittling and all of that kind of stuff. You cannot do that as a colleague. But a lot of the policies that they have are very much things that are done at head office level, and they don't always filter down into store level. And so that's why the Proud Proud at Woolworths has been around since for probably like 5 or 6 years, so not long. Which is kind of disappointing, but it's also one of those things to do with, the environment that it is. But within the committee, we are making sure that, we're all having, good conversations with people and trying to be active and, supporting things. And so I am very out there. They know I'm the asexual representative, and I know when there was an internal things that are happening where they've forgotten the asexual stuff, I'm putting my hand up and going, you need to include this. So I'm trying to make sure that they haven't got the A included yet, but it's purely because they have a co-chairs, and it has to be, done in a certain way. And I don't resent them for it, because as soon as I put my hand up and say, you've forgotten the A, they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. They don't think of it. That they're so used to advocating for the other letters in the acronym, and including the A is such a new concept for some people that they just don't think of it. And so, like, I know I've had work colleagues who have gone to me and said, I had to explain what asexual was to such and such because they saw it on your Facebook page and they didn't know why you were inviting them to this thing. And I said, well, I thought, it doesn't bother me whether people know or not. But other people don't really know what it means. And I know also in a customer-facing role that often customers come in and they hit on retail staff, and they try to. I've had a guy come up to me while I'm serving and putting his stuff through the register, going, "Oh, when's your lunch break?" And you're really pretty, and da 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 da. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know a polite way to say fuck off when I am talking to the customer. Because I can't. I'm not allowed to say that because that's bad for the company. Going, piss off. And so I'm trying very politely to say no. Very politely say I don't know when my break is, because at that point I didn't know because we hadn't written the breaks out. And he eventually got the hint. And basically my supervisor came up and stood there and went and just kind of tried to be, this angry, grumpy person about that they were annoyed with me, and then asked me to go and do something else as soon as I'd finished serving him. And I'm like, oh my God, thank you. So we are, regardless of orientation, the on the ground, the staff are trying to support each other and see unacceptable behavior like that. And being asexual has just been part of that process. But when it comes to big picture stuff like new gender neutral bathrooms and pride training and things like that, it's not always filtering down to a store level.
Thanks for sharing. Artemis?
Sure. So, I work in the DEI sphere, so diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so a lot of that is, what is my diversity, because I am a white female, and I'm also, asexual and aromantic. I am Jewish. I am autistic. So there's a lot of things that you cannot see when it comes to the diversity aspect. And so in my previous job, I was, talking to my boss about it. We knew about that. During last year's Pride Month on the internet, um, or not Pride Month, during Ace Week, I suggested, hey, can we have a content post about, you know, employees' ACE experience? And so I took point in writing that and even writing my own experience. And I was okay to sign my name. A couple people wanted, hey, can we do, anonymous? And you're like, that's fine. But I was okay to put my name because it is who I am. It is how I feel. And, you know, it's just a lot of good response and good support, and just making sure that, we have to advocate for ourselves to go, hey, there's, what does this mean? And yeah, I'm going to usually say I'm ace. Maybe if I say ego, then I get, even within the queer community, I get the, okay, can you explain that? And I have no problem, because maybe it'll help, somebody else learn. But previous job had a really supportive LGBTQ plus community, and it's always been, I'm hoping that wherever my journey leads to next, they also have a very welcoming community. And my goal is to, wherever I land, I will be part of that LGBTQ group. And if there isn't a group, I don't want to join that company.
Thanks for sharing. Next, Megan.
Yeah, I think this question for me made me think about how in academia, like one of the best qualities for any student or academic is curiosity. And so I have received a lot of curiosity from students and somewhat colleagues. I'm lucky to work in an institution with pretty minimal toxicity compared to a lot of academic workplaces. And so my colleagues tend not to push too many boundaries around each other's personal lives. But if I get to talking about my research on asexuality, I have gotten some questions about like, yeah, I don't quite get that. What is that? And, very open-minded sort of questions and allowing me to answer them. Students, on the other hand, I have had encounters with students. There was one student in particular who was just so excited to meet an asexual professor because they're on the asexual spectrum too. And sometimes students have a tendency to overshare and like tell you a lot of personal detail about their lives. And it seemed that this student was expecting me to do the same. And I realized I need to be prepared for this because I need to know what my own boundaries are specifically on like, what do I tell students versus colleagues about my own experiences and my own life. And one thing I've learned to do in these different situations with students who, most students aren't that, excited, that inviting, but I do have a strategy that I think would help everyone in any workplace, which is when people are asking me questions about my own life and my experience of asexuality, I often respond with general information about the community. So if someone were to ask me like, well, are you dating? I would say, well, a lot of asexual people are alloromantic and some are aromantic. And the numbers say, because I know the numbers, like about a third of the asexual community says they're aromantic. And then maybe I'll share, like, I happen to be panromantic, which is this other thing. But what they're really looking for is like information in general and not about my life at least I'm making that assumption because it's a workplace, and I'm going to stick with it because that makes me more comfortable to do my job. So yeah, so it is nice that and every interaction I've had in my workplace has been very friendly and very like inviting and welcoming. There are people who don't work at my institution who are fellow academics who have said less kind things to me about asexuality, but oftentimes these are people who know very little about it but think they know a lot about it, because that's a toxic trait for a lot of academics too. So anyway, with them, I have given, resources and then left them alone and made a note to just not work with them if given the opportunity.
Fair. Thanks for sharing. Marissa?
Yeah, from kind of the educational perspective, I definitely resonate with some of that. Right now, I'm getting my PhD in creative writing. So, as part of my TA-ship, I would work with people who had seen my writing, which was a lot of creative nonfiction about being asexual. So, it was one of those things where it was kind of like, they knew. I mean, you have to be honest in creative nonfiction. So it was funny because some people, it never got brought up. Others had questions. With me, it was I felt like it was always respectful, which I appreciated. And one of the nicest things to come out of this was I actually found out that a few of my coworkers were also asexual, and one of them actually had been doing behind the scenes advocacy work with me in one of the international ACE groups, and it was like, oh, that was you. So that was amazing. More recently, my last job before this current job, I just told them we were doing one of those get to know you activities, and I just mentioned, hey, I volunteer for all of these asexual orgs, and they asked what asexual was, and I told them, and it actually just didn't come up again, which was kind of that wasn't a bad thing, but I don't necessarily think it was a good thing either. And then most recently, and I just bring this up because it was kind of funny. I my latest job, I thought there was this Q&A that was sent out, and it just asked like things that you want your team to know. And so I decided, you know what, I'll share that. I think it's worth them knowing. And I must have misread it because they actually shared it with the entire company. But it ended up being totally fine because, no one has said anything but again, that's the word I keep using, fine, right? Like it's a weird area because you almost want people to ask because you kind of want to get that information out. You also don't want to think any assumptions are being made. But so I think that's been my experience. Nothing in the extreme negatives, but definitely more neutrals than positives. But neutrals are still, steps towards positives, I like to hope.
Fair. This is so fascinating because it's like we're getting quite the spectrum of experiences in the workplaces and the different approaches. And I would add for mine, it's dependent on which workplace I've been at. So when I was in manufacturing, I didn't feel like I was safe enough to come out, and nor did I really want to. I find that a lot of my energy around supporting the ACE community is to do community organizing on the side. And I don't think that work has a right to know about it or needs to know about it. And I don't care to put in the energy to have to explain about my identity in the workplace. And I don't think you should feel like you have to. If you have the energy to and you want to, like, by all means go for it. But I want to say that it's not the only option. Like, you don't have to if you don't want to. And I know there was one time where I did have a colleague who asked me if I had a boyfriend, and then kind of paused, like looked at me when I didn't really respond affirmatively and was like, girlfriend, but then also went on a homophobic and transphobic tirade after that. So I was like, yep, not engaging here. Like, let's not avoid this. We're just gonna avoid this conversation. I'm just not gonna engage with this at all. And I could say like that is sometimes the case where I don't necessarily want to open a can of worms where I have to explain myself or to do a lot of advocacy. And when I'm working on projects where I might have influence and I need to manage people without having any kind of authority really, other than please help me do this thing and let's accomplish it. I can't always afford to take risks where I might undermine my own, like, I guess, influence. And that's a tough choice to make. And so when I was working for a queer organization, I would say that it felt safer there to consider coming out, mostly because then I was like, we're actually supporting the queer community and these are my people, in a way that I want to see the advocacy done and pushed forwards and through to the system that we're supporting, and the network of youth, and a lot of youth who do associate and kind of identify with the asexuality spectrum. But on my current job, I've filled in anonymous forms that are like, you know, what kind of diversity are you? Please disclose. And I'm like, okay, I will put it on this form here where it goes into the void and it gets tallied up in some kind of like stats or what have you. But I don't think I'm at a point where I know my colleagues enough, and I'm partially remote right now as well. I don't feel like I've got to read on my colleagues enough to feel like I want to explain this part of my life. And it does get a little bit challenging at times because I have a queer platonic partner and I have other asynero folks in my life that I share a lot of closeness and intimacy to without strong labels. And it sometimes is a little bit abrasive to have to hide some of that. So I might say, you know, this weekend I'm going out to like see an art thing and I'm gonna hang out with friends. And there's a lot of language there that I'm choosing to use instead of using the word queer platonic partner, and trying to figure out if I want to explain things or not, and to what extent. And so I think I'm at the phase right now where I'm just trying to kind of nudge around. I've discovered that I have at least one queer colleague, so I was like, okay, potentially safe person here. But I just find that it hasn't really come up at this current workplace yet. So I don't know where I'm going with it, but time will tell, I suppose. And whether or not I want to get involved with corporate pride, and how out do I want to be when I'm involved with that versus just using a general catch-all saying, hi, I'm queer, and just kind of glossing it over in a way, but not really. Just choosing different language to use. And I think that's a decision everybody makes for themselves, hopefully, and not unwillingly or getting outed at work and what have you. But Gemma, you had another thing to add?
I just wanted to add that my perspective on this might be a little bit skewed because I've been with the same employer for, this will be my 11th year with Big W. And so most of my job life has been in this role. So and being out since 2005, I've had a lot of time to, I suppose, come to a good place with my asexuality. And I've done, you know, multiple media out things and run, you know, ACE weeks and been involved with IAD. And so I guess I probably come from a perspective of that my experiences are probably a little bit unique because from the majority of my adult life, it didn't occur to me that I needed to come out or that I needed to be out at work. And it was only really when I had a few colleagues at work that just went, oh, you know, my female partner such and such, or my boyfriend such and such, and just letting people hear that they are in a same-sex relationship meant that I went, you know what, I don't care anymore, you know. And I didn't even know there was a Pride network until about a year ago. As I said, I've been with the same, I didn't know there was. And the only reason I did is we changed platforms of communication, and there were these modules we were doing, and one of them was about the LGBTQIA plus community. And I was like, hang on a second, we have a Pride network? What the hell? Like, it was mind-blowing that this has just been sitting there and nobody knew about it. And I think that might be to its benefit, but also its detriment, because they don't have a way of telling everybody, and it comes down to a store manager passing the information down from head office. But I mean, like, I haven't not said that I was ace when people have asked, and the questions have been like, well, what's that? And I explain it and they go, okay, and they get on with it. But I know that that's not everyone else's experiences with those things. But I have had jobs in the past where it didn't occur to me that I should be telling anybody about my asexuality. For a long time, I passed as cis-het relationships most of my relations were cishet. And I'm in a QPR with Kate now. And so I just go, my partner, Kate. And if they have a problem with it, they haven't said it directly to me. They might have said it behind closed doors or to somebody else, but no one has said it to me. And it's just become a non-issue because while it is a QPR, you know, I don't want to have to explain QPR. When you mentioned QPR, Pat, I was like sitting there going, yeah, QPR is a whole other ball game. Like, it's one thing to say, oh, you know, my partner and giving their name and such forth, but it's another thing entirely to have to explain QPR. And I'm just like, no one bats an eyelid saying my partner, but if I went, my QPR, they go, what the fuck is that? You know, and then you got to explain that, and then they have, because it's such a foreign concept to a lot of people, you know, you don't want to have to explain yourself, whether it's the only thing you'll be explaining is being ace, or the only thing you're explaining is your gender identity. You don't want to have to explain who you are. You just want to be able to get in there, do what you have to do for work, and go home safe at the end of the day.
Thanks for adding that context and some more, about your experience. I would also add that I do wear an ACE ring regularly. When I was in manufacturing, you're not allowed to wear rings on the manufacturing floor, so that wasn't visible then. But I did have ACE socks, which my queer colleague did notice, and I was like, haha, I see you, you see me. But it hasn't come up since yet. On to the next question, which is, have you seen a workplace policy or initiative that feels particularly asexual inclusive or queer inclusive that you'd like to share about? Because sometimes workplaces are, well, like, we're doing our best, we want to be inclusive, but then they say, oh, we don't know how to do or what to do. So if there's anything you've seen before, whether it's in your own workplace or in a different workplace, please do and share. So, Marissa.
Yeah, I touched on this a bit in the intro, but I was invited to put on a presentation at a different workplace all about asexuality. And I had not seen something like that before, honestly. I had seen other presentations about maybe other orientations about inclusivity. But asexuality, I think, does kind of need its own spotlight, its own attention. And we discussed aromanticism a bit as well, and some of the micro labels for both. But I think that was just huge because they planned it around IAD, International Asexuality Day. They met with us in advance to see, like, you know, what they like worked on the presentation with us because they had questions too and things they wanted covered. And like, it really went into like in depth about like the history and how asexuality has been around forever, and asexuals have been part of queer movements. And I just thought that was amazing because it wasn't an afterthought. It was very much, and the people who ended up attending, because it wasn't mandatory or anything, but a whole bunch of people still attended, and a lot of them were queer. I'm not sure, obviously, if all of them were, but a lot of them were, and they seemed to gain a new perspective. And I just remember one person at the end saying that they were ace and that they were so happy that something like this had happened. And I just feel like, you know, that's like obviously very out there, very explicitly ace positive and ace attention. But why shouldn't we have that? I mean, I think we're making a push for that for a bunch of these orientations, and I think we should be. And I think asexuality needs to be included in that.
Thank you for sharing that. Gemma?
So I know that while the queer, like the Proud at Woolworths doesn't have the A on their acronym at this point in time, I know that within the content that they are creating, they are making sure that they are including asexuality as one of the orientations with intentional choices, such as on the internal website. They originally didn't have it on there. I put my hand up, and then when I went and looked at it, they actually have a whole entire thing they've gone and sorted out themselves. They told me originally they were going to come to me and ask me for content, but they actually went to an organisation called Out for Australia, and they've got content that they've gotten directly from them, which ironically was training that Kate did So it's come full circle, and it's really good that they didn't have to tap in, that they didn't tap into the asexual community to do that they went and sought that out themselves, and that information is accurate and current, and it's accessible to everybody that works under the Woolworths umbrella. So it's there, and I felt really seen when I saw this, because I thought I was going to have to do the mental labor and the emotional labor and all of that jazz, and I didn't. And I was really thrilled to see that. And the other thing that that is more recent than that was that at Human Rights Conference, the co-chair for Proud at Woolworths was there, and she saw Kate's presentation in the Erasure panel. And then she emailed me and she said, "Oh, were you at the Human Rights Conference?" And I emailed her back saying, "Yes, I'm in the front row waving an ACE flag and screaming and carrying on and whatever." And I got her out of office email. And that's how I realized she was at the Human Rights Conference in person, not watching it live. And there was an evening reception, and I went for a wander and I found her. And she's like, "Oh my God." And we had this amazing hour and a half conversation with this myriad of asexuals from all walks of life. And she's like, "I want to do what I can to put Kate's research with a more high profile, with the connections that we have and all this kind of stuff." And she's like, "We need to talk about this more, and people need to know more about this." And there was, stuff in there she didn't know, and, we need to all learn about it. And it was really good to hear that validation from the co-chair of my Pride organization, because she's, she runs the show essentially. And I mean, we do have little streams that people do things with, but it was just really awesome to have that reinforced from my Pride committee in a non-work setting as well as in a work setting. So yeah, I was really, really thrilled.
That's amazing. What a moment. Artemis, next.
So it's nothing that is really ACE inclusive, but my previous company with health insurance in the U.S., we don't have great ones. But one of the trans employees, kind of raised their hand and spoke up and was asking, "Hey, are there any trans inclusive benefits?" And I think maybe 2 years ago, the company, 3 years ago, the company actually included trans healthcare benefits. So that was great. What I could say is when it comes to our parental leave, um, it's not just they have included adoption as a benefit. So it's like you don't have to give birth to have parental leave. If you adopt, you also get that leave. And so in some ways, I do think that that helps with the ACE inclusive or just the queer inclusive, that it's just not, there's not only one way. Like if I give birth, I get leave. No, if I have a child in any capacity, I get leave. And I really applauded the company for that.
That's great to hear. Thanks for sharing. Megan?
Yeah, I was thinking about how pronoun practices in academic spaces have changed a lot over the years. I think there's an expectation that academia is going to lead the charge on queer inclusivity, and the reality is, like, we don't know what we're doing half the time either. And I think a lot of, like, in sociology, the United States Sociological National Conference has taken a long time to, like, perfect its pronoun practices for our, like, badges, and this is an important event for research and for networking and career growth. And our different universities have different systems for allowing students to set their pronoun on their rosters. And at my university, students have to sort of opt in and do some paperwork just to state their pronouns. And so maybe like 5% of my students do it. But I will say that first of all, there are some campuses that have no LGBTQ center for students at all, and that's really awful. But those that do, there's a couple things that research has shown is really important. I'm thinking of research by Amanda Mollett on, like, college students and asexuality. Definitely, like, if on their website they specify the A, the LGBTQIA, and make it really clear that the A stands for asexual, aromantic, agender, and not ally, that can make a big difference in being inclusive of asexual students. When I was interviewing for my job, I asked to like go see the Queer and Transgender Resource Center, and I was looking for an ACE flag hanging on their wall, and they had an ACE flag and a demi flag on their wall. So I was like, oh, okay, this this is different. They know what they're doing. So anyway, yeah, I think there's a couple things that campuses can do to be more inclusive of students, but there's also things that like professional organizations can do to be more inclusive of researchers and attendees.
Wow, that's great to hear. And I guess to add to what everybody said, I think the most, which was surprising to me, benefit and policy that my organization has of being working at an airline that I didn't expect to be kind of ACE inclusive, but just is by the way it works is, so airline employees get flight privileges, so we get discounts in standby flights, and it used to be that your privileges could also extend to your immediate family, so a spouse or your parents. But one thing, and your children, I guess, or any dependents you have. But one thing they started a few years ago was to extend these. If you didn't have a legal spouse and you didn't have dependents, you could actually extend this, like, I guess, benefit of sorts to a designated person every year, and you could change that person every year, and they didn't have to necessarily be related to you, or like you didn't have to justify who that person was. You just had to put their name down and say, this is the person who I want to share this benefit with me. And I thought that was like amazing, because I didn't even realize like that could be possible. And while that doesn't extend to things like health benefits or like additional benefits, it's just cool that they're considering something like that. And I remember talking to some people about it, and they said, well, it doesn't just benefit folks like you, it benefits people who are single, people who are, I don't know, divorced and what have you, people who are in all sorts of different situations where they might want to designate somebody to share this kind of extra benefit without needing to say, you know, I'm related to this person, without having to specify any kind of relationship. So I think that's really cool. And I don't know how that might translate to other industries or to other things in other workplaces, but I think it's just a neat idea that something like that might be possible. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Thanks, Gemma, for joining for as much as you could for the panel, and thank you for all the remaining panelists for staying. We have a few more questions, and I would also like to invite anybody who is watching in live on YouTube. If you would like to ask a specific question, you can feel free to submit a question at Slido. So that's sli.do, and use the code ACECON23 and look for the Asexuality in the Workplace tab for asking questions. Else, if there are questions in the YouTube live chat comments, I can also see that as well, so feel free to ask. The next question I have is a little bit tougher. What challenges, if any, have you faced related to your asexual identity in the workplace? Any takers? Otherwise, I'll point at somebody metaphorically. Marissa?
I can start with one. Going back to the education focus, I know, Megan, that you mentioned something about a student coming to you and kind of being excited about asexuality. I've had the opposite, where they've not intentionally, but they've unintentionally kind of denied asexuality as a thing. I remember very clearly we had read something in class, and one of the students, as a response to it, said something along the lines of, well, everyone wants sex and love or romance or something like that. And this was before I was writing things about being ace and really like felt comfortable and, you know, in that. So I just said nothing. I just kind of let the comment go. And later that day was like, well, if someone else in the audience or the audience in the classroom was ace or arrow, that was probably pretty upsetting to hear. So I've had experiences like that where students have said something, or more recently, people at in the office environment, they've said something where it's kind of like, well, that's a heck of an assumption to make. I think most recently it was related to marriage things, and like, oh, the right person, that whole thing. And it's very hard, especially now being out, because it's kind of like, well, I'm out. I've tried to explain this. Apparently it's not sinking in. But so how far do I want to go with this, or do I just kind of let it be, this assumption, which is inaccurate and potentially harmful, just because it's proving difficult, and could even cross a line where I'm not sure if it is workplace appropriate. So I've definitely not found that answer yet.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Like sometimes I just want like a canned response of like, thank you, that like comment was not appreciated. Asexuality is valid. Like being able to rattle something like that off and just do that kind of work in the moment. Or if somebody, I've definitely had the thing of like, oh, are you dating anybody? Oh, you're not? Like, oh, you'll find somebody soon. Like it's super important, and like, you're a great person. Like you should be in a relationship. Like a lot of those kind of assumptions about what happiness looks like in your personal life, and having, I guess, colleagues give you unsolicited advice about what they think your life should be like in some ways or another. I feel like that's come up, but not super often, thankfully. And when I have come out in that queer work space, which I think for me was a really good experience, so I could see like what could having an inclusive workspace feel like what would that experience be like, and being comfortable doing so. It was like very affirming to have people say like, oh yes, like I see you, I see your experience, and while I don't understand it, like you're welcome here. And like I was comfortable saying, I'm going to visit my queer platonic partner, we're going to go do things or what have you. And um, having the space to really kind of talk about that. But in terms of challenges, I think there was a moment earlier on when I was advocating for adding an A to the acronym, and people were like, well, why? Like we have a plus sign after LGBTQ. There's a plus, you're included in the plus. And I was like, yes, but, and they're like, well, it's a slippery slope. If we need to include one letter, we need to include all the letters. And I was like, yes, but you do have a lot of visibility, and you have a role in our community with representing identities, and you're serving youth who identify under this umbrella as well, and it's important to them to see this representation, and I think it's very important. So I'm glad that eventually turned around with, okay, I understand like where you are in your advocacy journey in terms of a community compared to where the gay and lesbian community is, the trans community is, and like maybe we're all at slightly different stages and pushing for different things in workplaces, but I think it's nice where there are spaces to have that voice as well. Yeah. Anyone have anything else?
Yeah, I wanted to add that I mentioned earlier that I've had professional, sociologists outside of my specific institution say things to me, and I think both of them were scholars who, the two I'm thinking of, are scholars who identify as queer. One of them does research on like queer topics, and both of them wanted to. They didn't like the way I was talking about asexuality, and it all came down to the like, well, asexual people aren't actually oppressed, was their opinion. And then it's like, okay, how many have you interviewed? 0. Yes. Like that's what I thought. But anyway, what's tricky about those kind of interactions as an academic is that I think for a lot of people, if you're interacting with someone who's giving her time, you're like, well, they don't have any control over my life, or they don't like they're not my boss, they're not paying my bills, so I can ignore them. In academia, like networking is so important and reputation is so important that like everyone can impact your career. So I'm not the kind of person who's comfortable telling people off. And like I said, I just sort of tell them, well, here's the resources and here's what you can learn from it. But oh, what was it? I was going to say something else about that. Yeah, I think, oh shoot, I might come back to it later if I remember. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I remember now. I got it. Okay. My concern, though, was that even if, I mean, those two interactions happened a long time ago, and I think at least one of them happened before I was like publicly out, so they didn't know I'm one of these people. But now, as I continue my career and as I do research and as I work with people, I've become really suspicious of other scholars because I'm like, now that they know I'm ace, I don't know who else is like thinking this behind my back, or like, I don't think that everyone who thinks aces aren't LGBT or don't belong in LGBTQ spaces, like what this one person told me, I don't think the rest of them are going to say that to my face, especially not now. And so it's made it a little bit tricky for me to navigate some of the professional spaces I occupy in the broader network of sociologists. And so that's something that, as I get validation from people outside of my institution and other sociologists, it means a lot every time. Like having strong allies in sociology who I've seen speak up for asexual people counts for a lot.
Yeah, no. And on that note, we're gonna have the opposite question, I suppose, for people to share. What's a moment of asexual joy you've experienced in the workplace? Anybody want to start? Go for it, Artemis.
Yeah. So I guess the joy is just being in a space and talking with coworkers that I've known for years. Because, like Gemma, I was also with the company for about 11 years, and um, we only started the Pride group around 2020 when a lot of things happened in America that kind of jump started more companies to include more employee resource groups. But a big joy was just being able to these people that I've known for years and going, hey, you know what? This is my identity. And for them to go, awesome. Like, thanks for being here and thanks for sharing your own experiences. So it was just really great. And also last year and then this year, and I will participate and fundraise for that company, was there's a local LGBTQ youth organization that puts on an annual 5K, and we participated as a company, and we last year raised the most in our fundraiser, and that was really great to see from the company, and a lot of higher level executives were actually donating to the queer community, and it was just a great feeling to know that you were supported, and whether they understand or not, they were supportive, and they let you be you, and they meant it too.
I love that. Yeah. Asexual joy. Anyone want to go next?
I can go. I think I've just had a lot of really great interactions, especially with students who are excited about asexualities. I had one student in a class one year who realized she was asexual because of my class, and that was really exciting to see her like get excited about it and want to research more about it. I've had a lot of guest lectures, and there was one guest lecture I did over Zoom with 200 students, and that chat was just blowing up. They were so excited and talking to each other about the sort of concepts they were learning from from the guest lecture was like helping them understand themselves more, and that's great. And then professionally, I have had some really great opportunities. Like people have invited me to write chapters for their edited volume, or do certain research related things, and that just makes me feel really validated and like I'm making a difference. I think most recently, I learned that two of the graduate students who I sort of informally mentor are on the job market this year. And I learned that one of them, they both interviewed for this one really prestigious job, and one of them got the offer, and the other's been interviewing other places. And like I looked back on, when I started this mentorship group I run, like my goal was for graduate students to get jobs and me to not be like the only asexuality scholar with it in sociology. And just seeing like the growth of the discipline and feeling like, wow, my goal was to make a case to sociology that asexuality matters. And like I feel like I'm seeing people now responding to that, and things sort of shifting, and that's made me just so happy.
Thanks for sharing. That's great to hear. I think for me, one of the moments that I can think about, other than being in the queer org and seeing people respond to surveys and to kind of like registrations, being able to check off ACE. And for me, it was also really important to see that for identities, being able to check off more than one, because I find that in the asexual community, it's not necessarily always as straightforward as I'm just asexual. There sometimes are more intersections and more overlaps and more identities that people use and are communities that they're a part of beyond their asexual identity. So I think that was really nice. But I've also remember there was one internship as a student where I was wearing my ACE ring every day. And about like 3 months into the internship, I had a colleague look over and one day over lunch was like, "Is that an ACE ring?" And I was like, "Yes, why are you asking this?" And then she told me that, "Hey, I'm also ACE. I just don't wear my ACE ring because some reason that I cannot remember right now." But it was just kind of that moment of, oh, someone has recognized it and they've, appreciated it. And we both felt seen in that environment. And while we didn't have to have long discussions about it or anything like that, just that moment of recognition, I think, was just so lovely to have. And I haven't experienced that at work since, but I've definitely experienced it in the wild. And that's always a fun moment for me. Yeah. And as we have one more question for the panel, is there anything you wish your workplace did for people in the asexual spectrum? And also, if you have any other closing remarks.
Well, I think after hearing your story, Pat, about being able to choose your beneficiary, that's something I wish every workplace would do. And in fact, that's how marriage laws really should be structured, and health benefits and everything should be structured, but that's another story. So I do wish we could choose our own beneficiaries regardless of like the nature of the relationship or whatever.
Sure. I also think, while it's great to see some benefits are opening up, I would like to see more um, fertility benefits, especially for people like I'm interested in having a child. I'm not interested in having a partner. Therefore, I would need, unless I'm just going to go hook up with somebody and do it that way, and I'd rather not, especially with the way technology and, medicine is, I would like to, figure out, can I do that? And, sometimes they're getting a little bit better with fertility benefits, but there's usually a clause of it has to be medically necessary. And at the end of the day, I think we're coming to this thing where if something, like like you mentioned, Pat, that it's not just for for ace folks, it benefits so many other people. And in the same way, wanting more fertility benefits that are not just, asterisk, you need medical, related to it, I think is also just benefits a lot of different people who, you know what, sex is painful because there's a lot of medical reasons that people don't have sex either. And but my partner and I would like a kid, or again, in the same vein of same sex couples, they're not going to necessarily have a natural way. So I would like there to be more um, fertility benefits that are, you know, opening up. I think that that would be a big thing. And then again, you just stop assuming everybody is partnered, because again, not just about ace folks, but not everybody is in a relationship. Not everybody wants to be in a relationship. Why is it your business to go like, oh, so do you have a boyfriend or girlfriend? Why does that matter? And why do you think I'm lonely if I say no? I'm not lonely. So it's more of just understanding that not everybody thinks the same, not everybody lives their life the same way, and it's none of your business.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize, I think those were both great ideas. Like, wonderful. So agree. In addition, the only other thing I would want to add is just queer inclusion in general. The more we strive towards that, the more I think asexuality will become a part of it. So I would love to see workplaces just make it so that you can be authentically you and not have to worry about uh, others' reactions, or even backlash from the company itself. I mean, I understand obviously like some gratuitous things maybe not being work friendly and stuff, but just knowing that, being able to share something, knowing that this isn't gratuitous, just knowing that this is part of who you are and being able to be authentically that. And I realize that's not really a policy exactly. But I do think, with more DEI initiatives, with more educational resources, with more leadership, who is ace, who are queer, I think we're going to get closer and closer to that.
Yeah, all great ideas and wishes and hopes for the workplace. And I also want to build on what Marissa said. Like, I do think the education bit is really important, especially in the workplace. And it'd be really nice if they just did that on their own and didn't require some extra self-advocacy or an ace person to do all the explaining about what asexuality is, and just have that kind of be part of corporate, initiatives, or workplace initiatives, and have somebody have that definition already in there, and think about kind of like the assumptions that people make, and kind of point it out. Hey, not everybody lives this way, and different people might have different lifestyles and different living situations and what have you. So I think, yeah, all of those are really great. And I want to say that is the last question. And does anyone have any additional closing remarks at all?
I guess just a reminder, goes without saying, but I hope everyone knows that they're under no obligation to be out in the workplace. It's whatever's safe and comfortable for you is what matters most. I think it was said earlier, actually, now to think about it, but just reiterating, and we appreciate you watching.
Yeah, so thank you, everybody, all the panelists, Marissa, Artemis, Megan, Gemma, for participating in this panel and for answering all these questions and giving your time and energy to this. And thank you to everybody who's watching live on YouTube for your time and energy, commenting and participating, and chiming in on this International Asexuality Conference. And thank you to people in the future who watch this recording. And yeah, have a fantastic time. And we will end the broadcast now.